Hey there, welcome to Mac TV. My name is Mac, and this is a space for first-time team managers who are looking to really up-level their skills as well as their confidence so that they can lead their teams effectively. So I'm super excited about this week's episode because I have a very special guest that I'm going to be interviewing today. Her name is Liz St. Jean, and Liz is also a leadership coach. But she specifically works with women who are looking just to rise into their leadership positions and break through that glass ceiling by conquering imposter syndrome. Yes, imposter syndrome. And I am really happy that she, took the time to be on the channel today because I know that this is a struggle for so many of you. These imposter thoughts are real. Let's be honest, particularly for a first-time manager. So I thought it would be super helpful to have Liz on the channel today so that she can share some of her practical tips and advice to help you overcome your imposter syndrome. All right, so let's dive into this.
So, thank you so much, Liz, for coming on this on Mac TV today. I'm super thrilled that you decided to, just pull some time from your busy schedule to spend some time with us because so much of your expertise, I feel, is going to help and really resonate with my audience. So I just want to thank you so much for being here with us
Thank you, Mac. I'm
today.
so excited to be here with you, with your audience. I love talking about this stuff, so I'm thrilled that you sent me the invite. Thank you.
It's great to have you. Okay, so
Love
why?
fest.
Yeah. That is literally how I feel. So,
Yeah.
why don't you tell my audience a little bit about you, what you do, who you serve, and kind of like your journey of what got you to where you are today? Let's do that. Let's start there.
Sure, that sounds great. So I'm Liz St. Jean. I'm a leadership and career coach. I often like to, I think of myself anyways, of being like in a Venn diagram at the center of, if you think of HBR, Harvard Business Review, and Brene Brown, and Lean In. So I do a lot of work around supporting women and moving into leadership positions and advancing into leadership. I have a real focus and a real passion for working with subject matter experts, frontline supervisors, and middle managers. I find that there's often so much focus on higher up executive level leadership that I really love to support women who are more kind of at that front lines and who are really working on the kind of contributions to the world that I think your audience, I know my audience for sure, they love to be making contributions and making impact. So that's my passion area. Um, I cover different parts of leadership and career growth, but my real main focus, and I know you know this, Mac, but it's really around imposter thoughts. The imposter syndrome, the fraud complex, the stuff that comes up for a lot of people, and especially a lot of women around that, wondering, do I really fit in? Am I doing okay? Am I doing good enough? I love working on that stuff. So I do a lot of work in that area.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, for me, it all comes through my own journey. I've had to work on these imposter thoughts myself over the years, from early on in my career. I'll just tell you a little story too that really kind of to me encapsulates like where it really came from. And I just started in the professional world, maybe a couple of years in, and I was trying to get my point across to someone. And the person I was talking to was a dude, and he's sitting at his computer. He wasn't even turning to look at me. Like he just wasn't even listening. And
Mhm.
I distinctly remember walking back to my desk, like the whole time, wondering, okay, what did I do wrong? What should I have said differently? What am I doing wrong here? And I remember sitting at my computer and I probably sat there, I would guess 10, 15, 20 minutes, replaying it over and over and over and over and over, trying to figure it out. And that got me onto this journey of looking into leadership and especially looking into leadership in women. Because what I've found is that we've got a lot of these thoughts, we're overthinking, we're kind of wondering about things. And there might have been something at play, but I spent so much time overthinking instead of leaning into my strengths and figuring out how I could show up. And I was worrying about too much about what he needed or what they needed. And instead of kind of centering back to myself and showing up as who I was. And so that's what brought me to that journey of working through imposter thoughts, and especially for women in leadership and showing up as leaders, is like leaning into who we are, showing up as who we are, and just feeling powerful. That's the thing for me is I want us to all feel powerful in who we are.
Yeah, wow. Liz, I mean, we've talked a couple times and I don't think you've ever told me that story. I love that. I mean, that resonates in so many different ways. And I've had experiences like that myself, not necessarily the exact same, but like where I'm in instances where I don't feel like I'm being heard. And afterwards, I'm like in my head about, the story I'm telling myself is 50 different thousand things about why that's the case. And so I totally relate to that. But I love how you turn that situation into something that's positive because this is how you created your platform, right? Based on that experience. I love that. You're so smart. Such a smart lady. But yeah, sorry, were you going to say something?
No, I was gonna say also, I just love this stuff. I love living it. And I even think, like I didn't realize it until that moment, the story I told you. But then even the last couple of years, I've been thinking back to where it started, and I think I've been thinking about this stuff for even longer than I remembered. Like was writing papers in this in high school
Mm,
about powerful women who are powerful in their own ways. Like
right.
there's a movie. Oh, I should have looked this up before. I apologize. There's a movie about a courtesan in like 15th century Italy. And I remember watching this, and I think it was grade 11 or grade 10, 11, 12. And I was so fascinated because, like, you would think she has no power. And the movie was about how she navigated that world and was still powerful.
Hmm.
We'll have to look up
Yeah,
that
yeah,
movie
yeah.
later on. It's
I was just gonna
it just
say.
completely escaped my mind, which is also okay. Hey, I'll say this too to myself, to you, to anyone who's watching. It's okay to have these moments where something slips your mind. At least I think so. I think it's totally fine to have these moments and then, admit them to all the viewers.
Absolutely. And I think it's important that you just called that out too, because I think so many of us think that we're the only ones that can't remember or can't find the words or whatever the case might be. And so it's important when people actually call out their quote unquote mistakes or, slip ups or
Yeah.
whatever, so that other people can see, oh wait, that happens to her too. It's
Totally.
okay.
And I think it's probably especially for those first time managers out there too, right? Stepping into this role and feeling like you have to be this perfect manager and everyone's expecting you to be perfect. And yeah, I'm gonna probably come back to this word power because it's like my word these days, but there is a real power in that vulnerability. And Brene Brown talks about this all the time. We've been thinking about it, but really absorbing that lesson that we can be vulnerable. Like we don't have to be perfect. Like there's so many presentations of perfection, and what we don't realize is that no one's perfect. Like there's no one's perfect.
Yeah.
And being vulnerable and being open allows you to have those conversations, and it allows everyone to realize that no one's perfect.
Absolutely. And I think that's a perfect segue into my first question, or maybe this is kind of what you wanted to say anyways, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Um, like, my audience is full of first time team managers. And so they're jumping into the role with basically no training, no experience. And so obviously I hear a lot of the same words, when I hear from them: imposter syndrome, self doubt, overwhelm. I mean, the list goes on, but it's all words in that category of imposter syndrome. And so, what is your advice for a first time manager jumping into this role and feeling that way or having those imposter thoughts?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. So, like, the first thing I want to share and offer for anyone who's watching this, anyone who's feeling those feelings, that there is nothing wrong with you. There's absolutely nothing wrong with having those thoughts. They're so incredibly common. And the second piece is like when you're having those thoughts, what it's actually telling me is something actually really quite special. What it's telling me is that you really care about your team, that you care about your organization, you care about the impact that you're having. That's the piece that's what that tells me as well, is when we're having those fears and the doubts and the worries, is that there's something there that matters to you. So it's nothing wrong with you. It's so incredibly common. And the reason that it's happening, and Mac, you've probably come across this, and for those watching, you might have heard of this as well before. I've heard of these concepts, is that it's essentially your brain trying to protect you.
Aren't you? Right.
So yeah, like I have my coaching peers, and especially I've got one really tight knit group. And what we notice is we always talked about what our brain is doing, and we kept typoing it. So now we just call it Brian. What is Brian doing? Because it kept getting typoed into Brian. So basically, Brian, your brain's trying to protect you, right? Like it's kind of built to protect us from harm. And what Brian doesn't know, because Brian's up here, Brian hasn't figured out that there's a difference between like physical life and death harm and social, emotional, cognitive, like where we sit in a group harm. So
Right.
Brian's trying to warn us, like you know that if you're about to walk out into the street and a car is going to hit you, your brain gets your attention and pulls you back so you don't get hit by a car. So Brian's trying to do that as well in like in at work or in situations where you might become embarrassed or you might make a mistake or you might become overwhelmed. So it's sending you all these thoughts to try and like pull you back from that situation. So that's why it's so common to have these thoughts, because it's basically your brain, it's basically Brian trying to pull you back from harm. Um, and the other piece, I know you wanted to get into some of the pieces around the practical side of things, but
Yeah.
did you want to take a pause and talk about any of the Brian element first?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, yeah, let's dive into that. First of all, I love that you guys named it. I think I think that's part of the taking action steps in the right way. Like, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I think that's so important to just call it out, like, and to name it. To be like, oh, that's Brian talking. That's actually not what the truth is. So how, like, walk us through what they should do when they realize that it's Brian talking. Like, what should be their next step? Sorry, I'm just intrigued. So
Totally, yeah. And oh, another little piece too. I'm gonna say we also have like we call it logical Brian and emotional Brian. So sometimes logical Brian is trying to be all logical, and sometimes emotional Brian is like bringing you all the emotions. So that's another little piece that can be helpful sometimes to recognize: is it logical Brian driving the train, or is it emotional Brian? And not that one's right or wrong or good or bad, but it's just helpful to know, to be
no,
aware. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, but in terms of some practical pieces, I know I think we'll talk about this a bit later on too. So I actually have an imposter cleanse kit. So that has four of my, I think at least are my best resources on getting over and overcoming the imposter thoughts. And one of those resources is, okay, this is totally tongue in cheek, but it's called the perfect system to overcome imposter thoughts, which I thought it was, I think it's
That's
hilarious,
perfect.
but I
Yeah.
don't know if other people think it's funny. I laugh when I made it up. um, but there's basically seven different ways of like practically handling or working with those imposter thoughts. So do you want me to dive into a few of them or
Yeah,
list them
sure.
out?
Let's
What do
do
you
it.
think?
Let's do it.
Okay. So the very first one, the P is for practicing self-compassion.
Mm,
That is like, if you take away nothing else from this, take away the importance of self-compassion. I know there's a big push, there's been in the last number of years of self-care, and I agree. Self-care is really important. Self-compassion is so critical. So like one way of doing this is when you're having that moment of all the, Brian's kind of yapping at you and all these the feelings and the thoughts and everything, you feel paralyzed, don't know what to do, your mouth is dry, all that stuff.
mm.
Take a moment, pause, and close your laptop, close your eyes, take a moment, pause to practice self-compassion. And one really quick way, you may have heard of this before, a really quick way is just to ask yourself, what would I tell a friend in this situation right now? What would I tell a friend in this situation right now?
You hit on something there. We would never say to a friend the things that we say to ourselves. If we, you know what I mean? If you really think about it. So I think that that step is super important because it lets you see, because you want in the kit for us to write this stuff down, right? Like, it's not just a matter of like in your head, right? Am I right? I feel like I saw
There's
that in the kit.
Yeah, so there's another resource in the kit.
Oh,
It's an imposter cleanse. You actually go through 5 days of cleansing it out, and there's a lot of journaling and self reflection in there for sure.
Because
Yeah.
if you see it, like the things that you're actually saying to yourself, you're like, oh my God, I would never say this to, my brother or my sister or a best friend. So you're absolutely right. I love that first step. Sorry, I didn't
Yeah.
mean to interrupt. Keep
Totally,
going.
totally good. Yeah. So, and part of this too, and this, a lot of this stuff is it kind of goes, it's almost like a constellation in the kit because it all weaves together. There's all these pieces that go together. But part of this self compassion and the thinking of what to tell a friend, you're tapping into your inner mentor. You're tapping into the inner wisdom part of you that kind of is calm, it's centered, and it can give you that wisdom that you need to overcome whatever it is you're facing.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So, yeah. So the second one is to express yourself.
Ooh,
So
I like
this is, yeah. So this is one I find that is, it's one of the most challenging, but also one of the most impactful is that we have all these thoughts. And then we have like the meta thought of like, oh my God, what's wrong with me that I'm having these thoughts?
mm,
So you can get kind of like tied into this self judgment going on, and expressing yourself to someone is so powerful because it gets it out of your system, and especially it'll often like help create a bond and a bonding vulnerable moment with someone else. So whether it's a mentor, a trusted friend or colleague, or a coach or a therapist, whoever it is, like being able to express those feelings in a place where you can create connection and you can get some non-judgmental kind of like objective feedback, especially like some objective discussion can be so super valuable.
mhm. I 100% agree with that. I think in the early days for me, when I did finally have someone in my corner that was kind of a mentor, I definitely benefited from that step of being able to talk to them and say, this is how I feel. And when they kind of repeat it back and go, oh, yeah, I felt like that too, then I'm like, oh, I'm not alone. And it
Totally.
just creates this like relieving feeling because we get pent up in our head that we are literally the only ones that are doing this or feeling this way. And so yeah, that is it provides an incredible amount of relief. I love that that's the second step in the process.
Yeah. And the power too, like thinking about it, and I know a lot of people might be very first time new managers, like very fresh to the role, but thinking about the power that you can have to share your vulnerabilities with your team and
Mm,
with people who look up to you as a role model, right? Just think about Mac's example that she just shared, where she heard from someone that helped relieve some of those feelings. So that you can be that person too. You can be powerful in that way as well.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, Mac, in your program, you have ways for people to talk with you, right? And with other, is there a group element to it as well?
Yeah. Yeah. There's an element for peeps to just like collaborate and just talk through some of their challenges and struggles either with me or with each other, whoever they feel comfortable with. But yeah, I think that aspect is really important because like I said, you tend to think you're the only one that feels this way. Like there it's not possible that that person feels this way because look at how amazing they are.
Hmm.
They're thinking the exact same thing. But I do think what
Yeah.
you just said about sharing it with your team is such an important thing because once you and I'm trying to get better at this too for myself is once you overcome something, it's really important that you are like aware of other people like getting to that journey. Do you know what I mean? Like because then you're able to look at them and be like, ah, they're probably at this point in their journey. I'm going to go talk to them and let them know I've got their back or let them know that, you know, I have a feeling they're experiencing this and I want to be there for them. And I think, but that's something that we have to like consciously like pull ourselves out of our busy lives to do. Do you know what I mean? Because it's so easy to just like keep barreling through. But I love that
Mhm.
point of like, yeah, if you helping your team and sharing that vulnerability with your team is such an because they're probably going through no they definitely are going through their own imposter thoughts as well. I feel like I'm talking
Definitely.
too much. I'm sorry. It's just because it's such an interesting topic for me. Okay, keep going.
Yeah. Well, and that's, you're expressing yourself. Exactly. Right. Like it's, And I know some people will prefer to express themselves in journals. I work a lot with a lot of people who like to journal. Maybe it's just because I'm an external processor, I'm an extrovert. I do see the value. There's such value in processing it out loud and
Yeah,
processing it with other people. So important and so valuable.
absolutely.
Hmm.
Awesome. Those are some
Yeah.
great tips. Well, I don't want you to give it all away. I want you guys, listen, I'm talking straight to you. I want you to get her, what is it called? I don't want to say it wrong. The
The imposter cleanse kit.
imposter cleanse kit. That's what it's called. Yes. I want
Mhm.
you to definitely, talking to you, definitely get the imposter cleanse kit. I will leave
And
all the details in the description box below. Sorry.
totally, yeah, and it's a super easy, I think at least a super easy website, themintambition.com/Mac, just for
Oh,
your viewers, just for your viewers.
I love that. Okay. That's like super easy to remember too. Thank you so much, Liz. So, yeah, I will definitely leave all the details for that in the description box below. So, I want to touch on something else just really quickly with you, Liz, because I know you kind of talked about it earlier in terms of your journey, but I want to cycle back to it because it is something that I hear quite often, which is this idea of like asserting yourself. So many first time managers that I talk to, they're very uncomfortable asserting themselves, even though it's their job to, right? Like as the manager of the team. And so or or they'll come back and be like, I was in a situation where I should have and I didn't. And so then, the thoughts are they're really condemning themselves. Do you have any suggestions for somebody who maybe is struggling with asserting themselves, whether that be with their team, whether that be in a meeting with their boss, whatever the situation might be? Is there any, practical advice you might have for them?
Yeah, I've got a few pieces of advice, at least based on my experience and the clients that I've worked in. The most important one for me is find your own brand, find your own brand of assertiveness. Okay. Like I think we hear the word assertiveness and we immediately go to like, okay, I need to show up at the boardroom or at a Zoom meeting and be speaking all the time and speaking forcefully. Like we're even like maybe picture a certain coworker or a celebrity, like that's what we think of as assertiveness. And
Mhm.
what I would challenge everyone to do or encourage, whichever one speaks to you, is find your brand. So like I'll give you my example. Like
Yeah, yeah.
I'm it's funny, like I love self-assessment, not so much the quizzes, but like the self-assessment reviews. And according to all of them, I should be the person who like demands attention and is domineering and that sort of thing. But it's not really my style. Like it's not really doesn't really fit with my values, doesn't really fit with who I am. So in a meeting room, like I've never been the person who goes in and like commands attention or demands attention. I'm also 5 foot tall, so that might be part of it too. That
That's
could be
definitely
it.
part of
I
Listen to
could
me.
right? I'll go in and like stand on like a what's it called, like a phone book or something. No, um, whether it's the height, who knows? Also, just not my style. Like it's just not really. I
Who
don't know.
you
It's not really
are.
my thing.
Yeah.
What I found for me was having really strong relationships
Yeah.
and showing who I was more one on one and just making sure that happened. And then when I'd go into rooms, people would listen and people would turn to me and they'd want my opinion. But it wasn't because of the kind of presence that it seems to be pushed so much, which is that like you should walk in and dominate, and that just didn't speak to me. So, what I would encourage everyone to do is figure out your brand of assertiveness. What feels good to you? What feels natural? What's the most natural way of doing it? And lean into that. And lean into that so much that it's maybe push yourself. It might feel uncomfortable, but lean into what naturally works already. Coming from a strengths based perspective. So, that's tip number one. Tip number two is practice. Like if you do want to work on that more assertiveness, especially in a group dynamic or one-on-one, practice in low risk situations. So I hear a lot of this where people are just like, oh, how do I deal with, and they present this kind of like a high risk situation. Like I need to present to my board. How can I do it in a assertive way? Like, well, before you do that, practice in situations where the stakes don't feel as high, because then you can work out the kinks and figure out your own brand before you go into that high stakes or high risk situation. Yeah. The third one is that if it's whatever kind of meeting it is prep ahead of time. Even if it's literally just 5 minutes, like I do this, I still do this, is like let me just grab one, I'll show you. Have a set of index cards handy. I always have like a stack.
Yeah.
And just jot down a few points that you want to make, or a few answer questions you expect to come up. Know what you want to say ahead of time. And you don't have to spend a lot of time. I mean, if you're presenting to the board, I do hope you are practicing your presentation and all that good stuff. Even just a team meeting, jot it down ahead of time. It's like one advantage of working remotely is that you can actually like take it and prop it up. You can have it like in front of you. But honestly, even in a physical meeting, just do it. No one's going to notice. No one's going to just have it in your notebook and jot down. Like I would do this all the time. I have my notebook, top left-hand corners where I always had it. I have I have a little, I'm doing this with my finger, but like I have a little box around it with the things that I wanted to have across.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then similar to what I was saying before is working on it with someone, either talking it out, like if a mentor or a coach, or there's different groups like Toastmasters or other groups that you can work on this, but it's to actually work on it. Like it's so easy, especially when we have imposter thoughts, it's so easy to just like kind of push it away, because the fear comes up, the overwhelm, the anxiety, and we kind of push it away, and then we end up winging it and without practice. And it may be okay. You may be okay, but so much better to practice and to work with someone.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That is such gold. Such gold that you just gave them. Some really, really practical advice. I think the aspect of preparing is so important. And I'm definitely like a proponent of that because I just need to prepare. And so I always tell people, because I don't know about you, but people seem to like assertiveness in general, like with your team or whatnot, is something that people talk about. But it's like particularly with meetings that they get really like wrapped around the axle with. And my thing is always like, just ask for the agenda ahead of time. If you know you're having the meeting on Wednesday, Thursday, ask the person that's holding the meeting to send you an agenda Monday, and then go through it and just look at how you can provide one or two thoughts or whatever, and prepare that ahead of time so that you can, say what you have to say without having to like say it on the fly. And that's like good practice until you get comfortable. But it falls in line with exactly what you're saying of like, get prepared. It's such an important aspect. Thank you. Thank you for
Yeah.
saying that.
We don't have time to go on my rants about meetings.
Okay.
Oh yes, agendas ahead of. Okay, we will have to have another conversation.
Yes.
But yes, ask if they haven't sent out an agenda. Definitely ask for one, because then
Because they don't.
and don't
Liz, you know that they don't always. If you
they
don't
don't
ask, they
always.
won't.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe this is a little bit more of an advanced tip. Like you may not feel comfortable early on, but I would say also don't let that stop you. Is that you can say no to meetings. I
Yes.
give you permission.
Yes.
Permission slip granted. You can say no to meetings.
But I didn't really do that for a good year. I thought I had to say yes to everything. And well, that's a whole boundaries issues, which we can talk about another time. But yeah, you're so
Yeah.
right. You don't need to say yes to every meeting. But people sometimes just like to invite people to meetings. It's just like a thing that they do. Let's invite everybody.
Let's
Meanwhile,
invite. Exactly. Yeah. We'll
meanwhile.
have to have a separate.
Yeah,
We'll have another conversation. Oh, I'm holding back. I'm holding myself back.
that's okay. We're just having a real talk here. All right. So I know that you have an awesome, awesome program coming out called the Career Breakthrough Boot Camp, where you actually help women show up with leadership presence. Can you tell us a little bit more about that program and just all the great details of that?
Totally. Yeah. So I do this program about twice a year, and we are doing our January session is coming up in a couple of weeks from now. So it is a career breakthrough boot camp, and it's all about showing up with a powerful presence, even if you have a super stressful workplace, even if it feels like everything's on fire all the time. Like that's actually one of the best to come into this boot camp and to work on some of the presence stuff. It's a lot of like internal stuff, but also how you're interacting with all the stuff that's going on. And it's a group program, so it's 8 weeks, and it's so amazing, bringing together women from across industries, which is one of the most powerful elements of it, is because you start seeing that there's all of these common threads, no matter what industry. Like we have lawyers, I have people in government, both Canadian and American government, people coming in from all different kind of private sectors. It's amazing. So the biggest thing is it goes all the way back to what I was saying at the beginning. It's all about helping you show up as yourself, powerful you. I'm not changing how who you are, what you say, how you show up, just being more powerful in who you are.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, I'm so glad that you offer a program like this. I wish it was 3 or 4 times a year, but I understand why you, why you offer it twice a year. It's very intensive, of course. I mean, because you're helping someone like really. Because I'm all over the place here, but I imagine that a lot of people don't really know what their strengths are. And so because of the fact that you're doing that, that is like super intensive. You're helping people literally see like what are their values, what are their belief systems, who are they, and then how can they use that to show up in their leadership every single day, right? Am I getting that right? Like that's a huge
Totally right.
portion of it.
Yeah. Yeah. The strengths piece. So, like, we dive into that's my favorite week. We do a whole week on strengths and diving into your strengths and what's your strengths brand. Like, I know there's a lot of talk out there about having your personal brand. I approach
Right.
it through your strengths. Like, okay, let's figure out your strengths, and then that's your brand.
Yeah.
That's who you are. And just as a quick tip for those who are watching, if you're a quick question to figure out what your strengths are is like, what comes easy to you that it's like you can't even fathom why people struggle with it. Like, what is it that it just seems so like you're almost like, I don't understand. Like, how is that hard for people? That is a natural talent that you have, whether it's a like a skill, like communication or writing, or if it's more of a how you show up strength. Like that is a natural talent of yours, my friend.
I love that. Okay, so I'm going to put the details of that as well in the description box below. It's an easy link too, right?
Yes, it's
Yeah.
themintambition.com/bootcamp.
Boot camp. There we go.
So you got two links so far,
Yeah.
slash Mac and slash bootcamp.
So super simple. Thank you. Yeah, like I'll put all that information in the description box below. Now, if my audience wants to connect with you and just chat with you, reach out to you, how can they do that, my friend?
Yeah, so there's two main ways. The one I mentioned before is getting that imposter cleanse kit. You'll have the option of getting my emails, my weekly emails, or you can even just write back to me after you get it. You can send me an email that way. So that one was themintambition.com/Mac to get that imposter cleanse kit. And then the other way is LinkedIn. It's so funny. I'm just getting started on LinkedIn myself,
Yeah.
so I love new connections. Come find me. I think last time I checked, I was the only Liz St. Jean on LinkedIn. So just
Are you
you
really?
get, yeah, like at
Cool.
least when I
Cool.
searched it, maybe I just wasn't pulling everyone up. But yeah, it's what so on LinkedIn as Liz St. Jean, and I'm sure you can drop the link in there as
I
well, Mac. But
definitely
yeah,
will.
would love to connect with you. Just send me a connect request and just say you saw me on Mac TV, and we can either start a conversation, or we'll just see each other around on the LinkedIn newsfeed.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's great to have you on LinkedIn. It's been great seeing your content. I'm so glad you're there.
Yay. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Liz, for joining us today. You definitely gave us some really, really good insights and just some really good questions for reflection as well. And so thank you so much for taking your time to be here with us today. I really, really appreciate it.
Awesome. I so appreciate it. Thank you again so much. It was super fun.
All
And
right.
thank you to everyone who's been hanging out with Mac. As you know, she's amazing, right?
Oh,
She's
thanks.
awesome. Thank you, Max. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.